Hello?
Hello, I'm calling for Ted Raimi.
This is he?
Hey, Ted, it's Rocco from Louisville, Kentucky. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Hi. Sorry, I wasn't able to pick up the phone earlier. I'm good. Thanks for calling me.
Yeah, no problem. Let me put you on speakerphone here.
Sure.
All right, you got me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't totally trust these machines is the problem, so I feel like I've become a nuisance.
No, it's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're audible. You sound just like Ted Raimi.
It's me. Can you hold on one quick second? Let me get right back to you. Hold on.
Yeah.
Give me 5 seconds. I'll be right with you. Excuse me. Okay, yeah. Hit me. Thanks for calling me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm always afraid of situations like that I'm going to do it and I'm going to get whoever the person is, and they're going to be like, "Why did you just call me right back? Why would you do that?"
Yeah, it's weird. I know. Yeah, it's strange too because normally I'm totally happy to call reporters and stuff, but I asked my agent to have you give me a call just because I know you're under time constraints, and so I thought, well, if it's 6 o'clock, I'm already in dinner making mode and stuff, so. I remember, my day may more or less be over, so I want to make sure that they remember, but no, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, here's 9, but I've been looking forward to it all day, so it's
thanks a lot, man. That's nice to hear.
Well, I'm a big fan, and I'm going to prove it to you. My favorite Ted Raimi role is Lunatic: A Love Story.
That's a strange one. Not many people know about that one. That's a weird one. That was my first big feature film. I think it was the first. Yeah. Well, I guess it was the first. It was the first. I don't know. I can never quite figure out if. I think it was my first big indie movie, but I may have already done. No, I did one movie before that. I take that back, but it was the first one I ever started. Before that, I had done Shocker for the now late Wes Craven.
Yeah, right.
But then I did Lunatics, and that was a fun movie too. Yeah. Lunatics was a fun little picture. We shot that one in Pontiac, Michigan, and over a span of 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks, and it was just a good little script. Josh Becker directed that. He did a great job.
Yeah, that's a really fun movie, man. I really dig it, and rented that because I had seen Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 right before Army of Darkness came out.
Right.
I won't tell you how old I was when that happened. I got bit by the bug, and really, so much of what you guys were doing there, your brother and Bruce, obviously, it really told me as a kid that you didn't have to just go work in a factory like your dad, and you also didn't have to end up being Harrison Ford, right? Like there's a middle.
Right, that's right. There's a middle ground in there, and there's a middle ground there is. Yeah, and if especially if you're in, you sound like you're a guy who was always in the movies, and I was too. And my mother really encouraged me to go into the business. I was lucky; I had very supportive parents. But at the same time, my parents had 2 separate successful retail businesses. They were doing that, and there was always this sort of temptation throughout my entire career to drop what I was doing when things got very, very hard and money got very, very tight, to go back to Detroit to do retail. Because I couldn't deny that they were both very successful. My dad was a furniture salesman, and my mother sold women's lingerie, and they had multiple location businesses. So I thought to myself, well, man, this, and I knew the business because I had helped them out. So it was always tempting, I wasn't one of these guys who, some of these actors, they have nothing to go home to.
Right.
There's nothing to go back to, there was, like, well, they wouldn't go back to their hometowns if, for any money in the world, but I liked my hometown of Detroit, and I liked my parents' businesses, so that was always a temptation to me. And it was challenging.
Yeah. At different points during your career, did you, like how close do you think you came on the doomsday clock to just calling it a day and stuff on the
That's a good question. A lot. All the time, and I'm not alone. I mean, there are, I don't want to name names just because, not because they are such anonymous people, but because they may not appreciate me sharing that information. But I can tell you that I am absolutely not alone in many successful actors, directors, and writers in Hollywood wanting to hang it up frequently throughout their career, including at times when things seem to the general public like things are hunky-dory. I'll tell you a story. Here's the most prominent one for me that I can remember is after I had done 3 years on NBC's Sequest back in the 90s, and that was a really successful show. We did well. Our numbers were great. They dropped us just because we were too expensive. At that time, we were the most expensive show on TV.
Always the thing with science fiction and genre shows is that they're pricey.
Yeah, they are, and this was a big deal. This was like the first really big budget TV, event show. We had, every show there were like dozens and dozens of CGI shots. Now today that's nothing. That can be done on, and it was a big deal, and only big studios could afford that. And and we had Universal and NBC, but I had finished that show and had 3 successful years, and I got back to Los Angeles, and it was for a time like crickets for me. There was no work to be had for like maybe 3, 4, 5 months. I was out of work, and it wasn't so much the money as it was just depressing to be out of work for so long. And so I had this, in those days I had this really reliable, I remember SL2 Saturn. It was a Saturn back in the old company, Saturn, car company.
Yeah, I remember Saturn,
Yeah, and I owned a little Saturn. It was a great car. I had it since the beginning of the show. And I filled that freaking thing up with gas. I closed up my apartment. I sold all my furniture. I put crap in the back seat, and then I was just going to roll back to Michigan because I had it.
How old were you when you did this?
What'd you say? What was your question? Sorry.
How old were you when that happened?
I would have been, started 26. I was 29.
Right.
And I
old
just
enough
had
to really realize how scary that is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I had my car filled up, and I was still going out on auditions. I just wasn't booking anything, and then I decided to give it just a couple more days. So I unpacked my car, and meanwhile, everything is in boxes in the middle of my apartment. And I walked into Universal Studios to just say, I was sort of saying goodbye. I didn't say anything to my friends, but I was sort of saying goodbye. So I went into Universal and saw my friend Rob Tapper, who at that point was doing Hercules, Legendary Journeys, to say goodbye to him and stuff.
Right.
And, to see if he wanted me to say hi to anyone back home in Detroit. And he said, I'm doing this new show. It's called Xena Warrior Princess. It's a spin-off of Hercules. And would you might be interested in doing an episode? And I thought to myself, well, that sounds like fun. I didn't really know what the show was, and I had done a lot of television up to that point, but and guest starring and stuff. And again, it wasn't about the money, it was just constant. I was just tired of the business. At 30, I was already like exhausted, which you can believe it. And
I would imagine that it's very exhausting.
What's that?
I would imagine that it is very exhausting.
It is exhausting. It takes a lot out of you, emotionally and everything.
It's essentially frightening, too. You know what I mean?
It is. I do. I think that's very well put. It is existentially frightening. That's exactly what it is. And, you go, you push yourself as hard as you can, for at that point at 29, I was pushing myself for 11 years as hard as I could. Living on my own and everything. I'd moved to New York when I was 17, and so I've been pushing myself really hard. And then, so I said yes, and then, that did change sort of everything at that point. Then that was another 6 years of my life doing that show, and that was kind of awesome. Really was. And I was a wonderful, years on that show, but yeah, I consider it all the time. To tell you the truth, I considered it about 3 hours ago. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding you. This is so common, and it happens so often. It's so hard to get projects rolling. It's so difficult. You can get a project rolling, sure. You can make a crappy little $30,000 movie anytime you want to make a crappy little $30,000 movie. That's not hard. But then you have to ask yourself, do I want to just spend the rest of my life making crappy $30,000 movies? You know what I mean? And I don't want to do that. I want to do something of substance and something that's interesting. So that's where the rub comes in. Anyway, I don't want to make your interview so depressing, but you asked, so I.
Right. So a question that will definitely be in the magazine.
Yes.
What is the role that you are most well known for when you're on the street? Do people know you because of Xena or because of Q-Lab or something else?
It all depends. If they come up to me and they've got, if they're tattooed with skulls top to bottom and they've got 15 nose rings and spiked blue hair, and they walk up to me, I know they're going to come up to me for Evil Dead.
Right.
And they're going to come up to me for Midnight Meat Train and Shocker and all the other, dozen horror pictures I've done. But if they have sort of the little, I would say, happy little twinkle in their eye and they look gleeful and they are clapping their hands together, it's probably Xena.
Right.
So that's how I know. It's really one of two things.
We're on one of those two things usually.
Yeah,
not often Q-Lab then?
Sequest, Sequest is, sometimes Sequest, sometimes Sequest. Sequest, usually overseas, they tend to like that stuff, a little more. I don't know why. It still runs fairly frequently in some countries. I don't really understand. It's a very old show, but, it's weird. But,
that was one of the very first places where they did a lot of digital stuff, right?
It was. In that show, we did a ton of digital effects. We had dozens and dozens in each episode, and that was a really big deal in those days.
Right.
That was a big deal. We had. No, it wasn't. I mean, remember, like when we were starting that show, one of the biggest shows on television at that time was Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury. So that was the kind of television that was around in the early 90s. It was pretty boring stuff. And then we sort of came around and had this big, huge sci-fi concept show. I mean, there were the Star Trek spin-offs. It's not like we were the only one out there. But we certainly were the big boy on the block, and we had Steven Spielberg behind us at that point as well.
Right. Well, that certainly helps, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, anytime there's any sort of genre, anything, it's always funny to see how it works and how it clicks with people and what happens. I'm gonna get to interview Bruce tomorrow. And I first met Bruce when I was 13 or 14 years old when Briscoe Challenger Jr. was on the air.
Right.
And you're right. And he came to the local mall as Briscoe County Jr. and pretty much didn't break character. And like you were saying, you saw fans that were clearly Evil Dead fans, and you saw fans that were clearly Cowboy show fans.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really do get both and for his show there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And I remember that I was like, wow, maybe this show will last the whole season. Like maybe they'll actually little buck.
Yeah, excuse me, that was my computer rebooting. Pardon me, I didn't do that. It did it automatically. Sorry.
Oh, that's surprising to you when you're at these conventions and stuff and see what fandom has become and just how many people there are and their interests?
It is interesting to me. I mean, on one level, the amount of fans, which are now number in the tens of thousands typically at these conventions, are on one level it's completely transitory in that we are living in a sci-fi horror, B-movie age. This is what's popular now. So by that measurement, in another maybe 5-10 years, it might not become so popular any longer. People may become more conservative again. It might turn back into the 80s or 70s or something. Who knows? But so I sort of look at it, having lived as long as I have, I sort of look at it with a little bit of a skeptical eye in that regard. I've lived through a couple ages like that. But on the other hand, it has made it possible for those who would already love that stuff and who aren't behaving in a pop sense, like a whatever's popular now sort of idea, to come out and be with a lot of people and feel good about themselves.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
When I was a kid. Oh, sorry. What were you saying? Sorry.
Oh no. I was about to probably go where you're about to go.
Yeah. I mean. No. Please go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh well, no. I was actually going to say when I was a kid. When I was 13 years old, I was obsessed with the Evil Dead movies. Everything you were doing, your brother was doing, that Bruce Campbell was doing. Doctor Who with Tom Baker, because I was watching the reruns. Comic books were a big thing for me, and nobody wanted to talk to me about any of that stuff. And now it rules the world.
It does rule the world. I mean, but again, I think it does rule the world. And when I was a kid,
not in the front of my brain. The front of my brain isn't bitter. You know what I mean? But it is.
What do you mean bitter? Like
maybe not. Like bitter, not too strong a word. Like I don't look at people and say, "How dare you be into stuff that I like?" But it's more just.
Oh right, yes, of course. It becomes right. That's what I mean to say. Yes, I'm just like you are. I feel the same way. But you have to understand that in any genre there are posers, but they're as fans and stuff like that, and people who love it and who pretend to love it, who don't really. But that all gets blown away in the end. As time goes on, they'll drop off as new things become popular.
Right.
So this type of entertainment is, I think, probably transitory. That's what I think. The enjoyment of this sort of intense sort of stuff. Yeah. It's just like
I'm sorry, we seem to have a little bit of a time delay.
Yeah, sorry about that. You know what? Why don't we try this? Can you call me right back and I'll pick up the phone? It might just be a connection problem due to something. But if you call me back, I bet we might be able to clear it up.
Yeah, I'm not taking up too much of your time, am I?
No, not at all. Please call me right back, and I'll wait here by the phone to answer it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ted.
Okay, bye. Hey, it's me.
Hey there.
So that might be a little better, well, at least for a while.
Yeah. Well, as long as I'm not going to get you mad at me, I think we'll be okay.
No, we're fine. We're just fine.
All right, cool. Very good. Very good. I mean, that's the thing is that I've often said that the difference between like a hipster and just a fan of something is that the difference between irony and enthusiasm. You know what I mean?
You mean to say, yes, I do know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. I agree. Totally agree with that.
I'm talking to some kid who just saw, the new Doctor Who or whatever. He's going to watch the new Evil Dead show or whatever. And he's excited about it. The last thing that I want to do is be like, oh, well, I was there when nobody knew about it. Just because I happen to be lucky enough to come across it. And be the kind of guy that just kind of hit. So.
Right, and it's always a little disappointing when, 10 million people like the thing that you liked when no one else liked it. But, I mean, that's why they call people like you tastemakers, and that's why you're a writer for a magazine and you have a web presence, because people do watch you for those things. That's why you have the job you have, after all, because you are very good at that.
Well, thank you. I got it from Ted Raimi's direction, so it must be true.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Ted, here's where we'll definitely go in the magazine with a little bit of an explanation. I believe that you were probably the original fake chef. Is that true?
I don't know. You know, that expression, fake chimp, I hear that a lot, I know. But I guess I am. But really, that was invented by Sam, my brother, Bruce Campbell, and Bruce Campbell, and Scott Spiegel, who was one of the writers of Evil Dead. And it was of course, it's an affectionate term meant for anyone who's helpful, but really it started out as it was a note about Shemp Howard when he would do intense stunts on the Three Stooges, was often doubled by probably some guy over there at Republic Pictures, no doubt. But he wasn't a very good double, because those were B shorts, you know. They were never A-list shorts, they were B shorts.
Right.
So he played in front of B pictures. So this guy was a very bad double, and he kind of always did a lousy job of blocking his face and stuff. So they would affectionately call anyone who was a helper a fake chimp, but I guess so, yeah.
I actually read a different story about that, and it was.
Oh, you did?
I'm gonna go deep geek on you, man. I'm gonna go way deep on you.
Go ahead.
The Army of Darkness comic book
adaptation
that was done by Dark Horse had an interview with Bruce in the back, and in that he said that fake Shemp came about because Shemp had died in the middle of them making a short. And that in that short, they went ahead and finished it anyway because they didn't want to lose the footage. So they had a guy who would come on with his hands over his face, and he was supposed to be Shemp, but he wasn't. Shemp was
he might be right about that. I seem to remember Scott Spiegel telling me that he was just being a few people being bad doubles, but perhaps he had already died. That is entirely possible.
Right. Yeah. I'll run
that you may be right about that. I could be entirely wrong. But in any case, it's a I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely a kind term to give to somebody.
Oh yeah, it's an honor. I mean, I've worked on little movies and stuff that are, no budget, and everybody always talks about Shemp, fake Shemp this, fake Shemp that, and it's just it's definitely something that is caught on and is part of the lexicon.
Yeah, funny thing.
Yeah, it's just great how that works out. So, would you say that do you have a real ingrown or inborn passion for horror filmmaking, or do you think that it's sort of one of those things where it's like at the time that you were first sort of coming up in the business, if you're going to make an independent movie, that would be the kind of movie that you would make?
When I was starting out, back in the 80s, Bruce and those guys started a decade earlier, but even when I was starting out acting-wise in the 80s, making a horror movie was only slightly better than making a porno. In fact, people would say, as a half joke, and this is true, people would say as a half joke, well, at least they're not doing porn. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, well, shit, man, dude, I'm, sort of a pat on the back, like, you couldn't get anything real if you had to do a horror movie, sorry, man.
Right.
That's how it was looked at. That's how those who were in horror movies were looked at.
Right.
And to this day, it's, even though it's very accepted and a big moneymaker, people still, to some small degree, look at that. If you look at the cast list of horror films, only a very few have A-listers.
Right, yeah.
And if they are, still, to this day, there are very few have. I mean, it's funny, despite how popular it is, guys like Bradley Cooper still probably wouldn't want to do a horror film right now.
Right,
That wouldn't be big on his list, you know what I mean? But a gal like Katie Sackhoff, a fine actress and a very interesting girl and talented and all that stuff, would. Because she's on maybe she's not an A anymore, maybe she's an A- or something, I don't know. Whatever, there's nothing disparaging against her. She's a wonderful actor, but, that's just the way it is. And so, when I was starting out, it was really like that. Now, I mean, it's expected. But then it was the last thing you'd really want to be telling, your friends and, you know, your other actor friends that you were doing, you know, was sort of a slightly shameful thing.
Right.